They said it would be just for a few days, but I never saw my father again. I was still a boy, maybe 7, 8 years old, maybe less. Time back then wasn't counted in numbers, it was counted in pain. I remember the smell of wet earth, the sun on my father's back, and his voice singing low while we walked barefoot through the brush. Heading home, he always sang one of those songs his mother taught him, in the language of our people, a language I barely remember now. That day, the men came, white men on horses with guns and shouting, so much shouting. My mother held me tight. My father tried to hide us, but there was no use. They grabbed him first. He tried to speak to me with his eyes. He tried to smile so I wouldn't be scared. And one of them said, "It's just for a few days. He'll be back soon." A lie. He never came back. I waited every day, every night, listening, thinking any sound might be him returning, that he'd lift me in his arms and sing to me again. But time went on, and his face started slipping from my memory. I held on to his voice, only his voice stayed. Even that faded, that night. A part of me was taken with him, and it never came back. They say a man can get used to anything. I don't know if that's true, but I know there comes a point where the screaming stops, not because the pain ends, no. The pain stays. The screaming stops because something inside you goes quiet. That silence becomes part of you. It was like that for me after they took my father. Days passed, then weeks, and eventually I was sold. Just a boy with no name of his own, only the name someone else gave me. A sound shouted when I was needed. They didn't care where I came from, what my people were called, or what I had lost to them. I was just another body small, but able. My first chain wasn't made of iron, it was made of looks, of rules I didn't understand, of fear. I was taken far from the forest I knew, to a place with long fields and white houses that smelled of sugar and smoke. The men spoke a language I barely recognized. The women didn't look me in the eye. Everything was fast, and I was always behind. I remember the first time I was told to kneel. I didn't do it fast enough. A blow to the back of the neck taught me the pace of their world. I learned quickly after that. They said I was lucky I wasn't sent to the fields right away. I was small, so they put me to serve in the kitchen. But even luck in that place was a lie. The heat of the fire burned my skin, and I couldn't cry if I dropped anything. It was my back that paid. I worked in silence, the way the others did, eyes down, never speaking unless spoken to. We spoke at night in whispers when the world was asleep. That was when I learned the other kind of chain, the one that binds you to those around you, the ones who share your pain, your hunger, your longing. The older ones told stories, not of hope, but of memory of lands far beyond the sea, of names that meant something, of gods that still listened. They spoke of freedom, but not the kind written on paper, of freedom in the heart, in the eyes, in the songs we hummed when no one was listening. Still, silence was our shield. The world above us was loud boots on wooden floors, dogs barking, orders shouted across the yard. We learned to move without noise, to work without complaint, to cry without sound. There was power in that silence, yes, but also danger. It could swallow you whole if you weren't careful. Some did disappear inside it, men who no longer spoke, women who forgot how to smile. I held on by listening. Every word shared in secret became a brick in the wall I built inside myself, a place to hide my name, my father's voice, the warmth of my mother's arms. One day I was told to fetch water. It was raining hard, the bucket was heavy, and my foot slipped in the mud. I fell, the water spilled. The overseer didn't even raise his voice. just brought the whip down across my back. The first lash stole my breath. The second made me bite my tongue so hard it bled. After the third, I stopped counting. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I was afraid if I did, I would lose something I couldn't get back. That day, my silence became armor. I wore it every day after, thicker than any cloth, tighter than any chain. They thought it meant I was obedient. They never guessed it meant I was still alive inside. There were children like me, younger even, who arrived after. I watched their eyes change from wide and bright to dull and tired. I wanted to tell them to hold on, to bury something deep inside that no one could reach. But I couldn't speak, not just because it was dangerous, but because I no longer knew what words could do. So I showed them with my hands, with a glance, with a shared piece of bread. That was how we spoke. They called us beasts, but beasts don't cry for each other. In silence, beasts don't dream. I did. I dreamed of trees, of rivers, of my father's back as he walked ahead of me. I never saw his face again, not even in dreams, but I saw his hands rough, wide, strong. I imagined them breaking the chain, lifting me up, carrying me far away. Every day, I woke and the chain was still there, but so was the silence, and somehow, I was still breathing. I don't know how long the journey lasted. Time lost its shape once I was taken. The days melted into one another, and the nights were filled with the sound of people crying, praying, whispering names of mothers, sons, places none of us would see again. When I first arrived in their world, the world of white men, it was like stepping into something not quite real. The sky felt farther away, the land looked different, and everything smelled of ash, iron, and sweat. We had traveled in darkness, locked away like animals, barely fed, barely spoken to. When they opened the doors, the light was so bright it burned my eyes. I stumbled, weak, barefoot, and thin. My wrists still riled from the iron around me. Others fell too, and we were pushed forward like cattle. The white men spoke fast, with harsh sounds, barking orders and laughing like our fear was a joke. I didn't understand their words, but I understood their eyes cold, sharp, watching us like things, not people. The first thing I noticed was how clean they looked. Their clothes were bright, their skin pale and soft. They didn't look like they worked. Their hands didn't have scars. The man who bought me didn't even touch me at first. He just pointed and nodded, and another man handed him a piece of paper. I didn't know it then, but that paper meant I belonged to him now. I didn't know what belonging meant in their world, but I would learn. The place I was taken to was wide and open, with fences and fields that stretched so far they touched the sky. The house was big, white, with windows like eyes that watched everything. I was not allowed inside, not at first. I was taken behind it to the small wooden cabins that sat crooked in the dirt. That's where we slept, or tried to. The others looked at me, some with pity, some with nothing at all in their faces. They had been here longer. They knew not to ask questions. That night, I slept on the floor with strangers. No blanket, just the sound of breathing, the creak of old boards, and the distant howling of dogs. The next morning, before the sun rose, a bell rang. That bell would come to rule my life. It told me when to wake, when to eat, when to work, when to stop. If it rang in the middle of the night, someone was about to be punished. I feared that sound more than thunder. They gave me clothes that didn't fit, shoes that rubbed my heels raw, and a new name. I don't remember the old one anymore. The new name wasn't mine either, but it was what they called me. And I answered because not answering meant pain. I was taught how to walk when they watched, how to look down, how to keep my hands behind my back. Everything had rules. If you broke them, You bled. I learned by watching others. A boy not much older than me looked a man in the eye once. He didn't do it again. I saw women flinch at footsteps. I saw men go quiet when the master walked by. I understood then that this place was not just fields and cabins. It was a world built on fear. The world of white men wasn't just different, it was designed to crush us. Even the air felt heavier. I worked wherever they told me. Sometimes in the fields, sometimes carrying buckets, sometimes sweeping floors. My hands never stopped moving. My back never stopped aching. The white children would laugh at us, throw stones sometimes, or mock the way we spoke. I was told to smile when they came near. If I didn't, I would be punished. One day, one of them asked me if I could sing. I shook my head, but he made me anyway. I sang with a voice that wasn't mine, words I didn't understand, and they clapped like I was a pet. That night, I cried, quiet, into my hands, so no one would hear. I learned their language over time, not from books or kindness, but from necessity. I learned the names of tools, commands, threats. I learned the difference between silence and obedience. I learned how to disappear in plain sight, but I never felt part of their world. I was inside it, yes, but never of it. Their houses had walls, but no warmth. Their smiles had teeth. Their rules changed when it suited them. I stopped asking why. Asking meant remembering, and remembering hurt. I buried my old life deep, like a seed I hoped would never die. I didn't speak of my village, or my father, or the songs I used to. No, I kept those locked away, untouched, because even though this world had taken everything from me, I would not let it take that too. I watched the seasons change. I watched new people arrive and others vanish. I watched the white men ride horses while we walk. I watched the world move on, uncaring, while we stayed frozen, trapped in someone else's idea of what life should be. And in all of it, I waited for something to change, waited for someone to see me, waited for the part of me that was still alive to matter again. The work was endless, from the moment the sun touched the sky to when it disappeared behind the trees. There was no rest. My body learned a new language, a language of pain, sweat, and weariness. The fields stretched like oceans, green waves, of cane or cotton that demanded bending, cutting, picking, and carrying. Each step was heavier than the last, the ground rough and uneven beneath my bare feet or the worn shoes they gave me. The overseers never stopped watching, their eyes sharp and cold like the knives we used to cut the stalks. They measured our work in pounds and hours, but to me, it was measured in every ache that gnawed at my bones. The sun beat down mercilessly, burning my neck and shoulders until they felt on fire. The hunger came slowly, like a shadow creeping over me, stealing strength and hope in equal parts. We ate what little was given, mostly leftovers, and then gruel that barely filled the belly. I watched the others around me crumble, not just from the work, but from the hopelessness that clung to us like a second skin. Still, there was no slowing down, no asking for mercy. Every moment without work was a moment closer to punishment. I learned to move fast, to hide the tremble in my hands, to push through the exhaustion that begged me to stop. Sometimes my hands bled from the rough stalks, sometimes my feet were swollen and raw, but the pain was a silent companion. I didn't speak of it, because speaking meant weakness. The others taught me how to survive the mask pain with a blank face, to swallow gritted teeth, to keep going even when the body screamed for rest. I learned the secret glances, the shared small comforts, a stolen piece of fruit, a whispered joke in the dark, a hand squeezed in solidarity. There were moments when the weight of the labor crushed more than just the body, it crushed the spirit. The work was a chain wrapped tightly around us, binding us to the land and to each other in suffering. Yet somehow, even in that burden, a spark remained. Sometimes, in the silence between the work, I would hear a song, soft and low, carried by the wind or hummed quietly by one of the women. Those songs were stories, reminders of who we were before the chains, before the pain. They told of rivers wide and deep, of mountains tall and proud, of homes lost but not forgotten. In those moments, the labor felt a little less like a prison. It was a cruel teacher, but it taught resilience. It taught the body how to endure, the mind how to protect hope. I watched the seasons change around me, each bringing new challenges, the mud in the rainy months, the cracked earth in the dry. Each season was a test, and each day survived was a victory. But no matter how much work I did, no matter how hard I pushed myself, I was still less than human in their eyes. Just a tool, a beast of burden, a number on a ledger. Sometimes, when the overseer was not looking, I caught a glimpse of my own reflection in the water-sunken eyes, cracked lips, hands scarred and callous. The man staring back was a stranger, a ghost of the boy who once ran free in the forest. Yet, beneath the scars and dirt, a fire burned quietly. It was the fire of survival, the fire of memory, the fire of a soul that refused to be extinguished. The weight of the labor was more than just physical, it was the weight of knowing the world was against you, of carrying generations of pain on your back. But it was also the weight of knowing you were still here, still breathing, still fighting. In the only way you could. The work never stopped, but neither did I. Even in the darkest of nights, when the world seemed determined to swallow every trace of hope, there was a part of me that refused to be broken, a flicker of light hidden deep within the soul, refusing to be snuffed out by chains, lashes, or the endless weight of despair. That part was the heart of resistance. Though it wore no armor and bore no weapons, it was quiet, unseen, but stronger than any iron. I learned early that survival meant more than just breathing. It meant holding on to what made me human in a place built to erase that very thing. The masters wanted our bodies to work, our spirits to bend, our voices to silence, but they could never reach the parts of us that whispered in secret, that carried songs and stories from a time before we were captured. At night, when the world fell asleep, we gathered in the shadows, speaking softly in the old tongue, passing memories from one to another. We shared tales of ancestors who stood tall and proud, who walked free beneath open skies. These stories were more than just words, they were lifelines. They reminded us that even in chains, we belonged to something greater. The songs we sang were not just melodies, they were spells, binding us together, protecting us from the loneliness that tried to consume our minds. I remember the sound of those voices rising in the dark, sometimes a lullaby, sometimes a mournful cry, sometimes a fierce shout that challenged the silence of the night. In those moments, the harsh world melted away. For a few precious hours, we were free in our minds, free in our hearts. The old ones taught us how to listen to the wind, how to read the stars, how to find strength in the earth beneath our feet. They spoke of hidden paths, of secret places where the spirit could roam without chains. Those lessons were gifts, handed down like sacred treasures, carried in the rhythm of drums and the beat of our hearts. Resistance was not just rebellion, it was survival. It was the choice to keep a part of ourselves alive, no matter what was taken. I saw it in the eyes of others, small acts of defiance, a stolen smile, a shared glance that said, "I see you, and I am here." Even the smallest gestures carried meaning, a hidden flower, a secret prayer, a whispered name. They were threads weaving a tapestry of hope. But resistance came with risk. The masters hated the quiet strength we nurtured. They punished songs, silenced stories, and broke those who dared to dream of freedom. I remember the day when one of the women, brave and fierce, was caught humming a forbidden tune. The whip found her back, and the sound of her cries echoed through the camp. Yet, even then, her spirit did not break. Her pain became a symbol, a reminder that the fire inside could never be fully snuffed. Over time, I learned that resistance was as much about patience as it was about courage. It was a slow, steady flame, not a raging fire. It lived in the small moments, sharing a piece of bread, helping another carry their load, protecting the young from harm. It was in the way we looked after each other when no one else would. We were bound not just by chains, but by shared suffering and shared hope. And that bond was unbreakable. I often think about how, despite all the cruelty, some part of us remained untouched. The laughter of children playing quietly, the tenderness in the mother's touch, the kindness of a friend offering a helping hand. Those moments were tiny rebellions, acts of love that defied the harshness of our world. They kept the soul alive. Even when my body ached and my spirit was weary, I clung to that flame. It was the part of me that remembered who I was, who my father was, and who I hoped to be. It whispered that I was more than a slave, that I was a man with a story worth telling, a life worth living. And so, I carried that soul through the darkness, through the silence, through the endless days of toil. I carried it like a shield and a song, a secret treasure no one could take away, because in the end, the soul that does not break is the true freedom, the true victory, the heart that no chain can hold. The whip was not just an instrument of punishment. It was the language of terror that spoke louder than any words could. It sliced through the heavy air, a sharp crack that shattered the silence and sent chills down every spine. From the first moment I saw it in action, I understood that it was a force meant to break not just the body, but the spirit itself. I remember the day clearly. A man, tall and proud, stood his ground, daring to question the overseer's orders. The whip came down before his words had even finished. The sound was deafening, a sudden thunderclap that echoed through the fields and stirred the birds into frantic flight. The lash tore through his back, and his screams rent the air like a storm breaking loose. I watched, frozen, as his body convulsed under the strike. But it was what came after the silence that struck me deepest. The man who once stood tall now knelt in the dust, his eyes hollow, his spirit shattered. That moment marked the beginning of a fear that wrapped around us like a thick, suffocating fog. It was not only the fear of the pain itself, but the terror of what it meant: total submission, unquestioning obedience, the loss of self. The whip taught us quickly that resistance meant suffering, and suffering meant death of hope. Each crack was a warning, a reminder that the world we were forced into was not ours but theirs. Our bodies belonged to others, and every movement was controlled by a lash or a command. I saw boys younger than me beaten for speaking a word out of turn, women whipped for looking too proud, for daring to carry themselves like free people. The pain was endless, but the scars ran deeper than the skin. They tore at the very fabric of our souls. Yet, amid this terror, we found ways to survive. The fear was a powerful chain, but it could not fully bind what lived inside. We learned to read the quiet signs, the narrowed eyes of the overseer, the tightening of a grip on the whip's handle, the sharp whistle that sent us scattering. We became shadows, moving silently, guarding each other in small acts of kindness, offering a hidden piece of bread, a whispered word of encouragement, a touch to steady trembling hands. These small rebellions were our lifelines, fragile threads of hope woven into the darkness. I remember nights when the pain throbbed in my back like a relentless drumbeat, each scar a cruel reminder of what we endured. But it was not just the physical agony that haunted me, it was the weight of knowing that the whip was a symbol of power, control, and dehumanization. It was a tool designed to teach us that we were less than human, to erase our identities and replace them with obedience. But I refused to let it erase me. In the depths of my heart, I clung to the memory of my father's hands, strong and steady. The songs we once sang, the language of my people that no whip could silence. I carried these memories like a shield, a sacred fire burning quietly beneath the surface, filling my resolve to survive. And I tell you this not to dwell on suffering, but to honor the resilience that lives within us all. This story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit, even in the darkest places. If you have stayed with me through these words, if this tale has touched something deep within you, I ask you to take a small step alongside me. Subscribe now, so you won't miss what comes next, because the journey is far from over. There is more truth to uncover, more pain to understand, and more hope to find. Your voice is part of this story too. If you feel moved, leave a comment, share your thoughts, your feelings, your own memories, and if this story stirs your heart, pass it on to others who need to hear it. Together, we keep alive the memories of those who endured, those who fought, and those who dreamed of freedom. The lash may leave its scars, but the spirit within us remains unbroken, a light that no darkness can extinguish. Love in chains was never loud. It didn't arrive with songs, or flowers, or promises. It came quietly, like a breeze through the trees at dusk, soft, unexpected, but unmistakable. It came in stolen glances across the fields, in whispered greetings, while passing water buckets, in the gentle press of fingers beneath the shadow of the cabins. In a world where we own nothing, not even our names, love was the one thing they couldn't fully take. They tried. They separated lovers as punishment, sold husbands from wives, took mothers from children without a word. They wanted us alone, broken, easier to control. They feared what love could do, how it made us stronger, how it made us fight for each other. But love found ways to live even among the ashes. I remember her, she moved like a prayer, quiet but full of strength. Her laughter, when it slipped out, was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. We were careful, always careful. Affection shown too boldly brought the whip, or worse, separation. So we loved in silence, in small offerings, a piece of cornbread saved from supper, a scrap of cloth sewn into a hidden pocket, the memory of her hand in mine on a cold morning. We met in the stillness after dark, when the moon watched over. US and the world finally stopped shouting. Our words were few, because the many could bring danger, but they meant everything. She once told me, they can chain our hands, but not our hearts. I never forgot that. That truth lived inside me, through every day of labor, every crack of the overseer's voice. It gave me something to protect, and it wasn't just romantic love. I saw it everywhere, between friends who risked beatings to share food, between elders and children, between strangers who took on one another's pain just to offer rest. Love was the thread holding us together, keeping us human. The women carried it in lullabies sung under their breath, the men in the way they shielded the young from harsh eyes. I watched a mother, her body trembling from exhaustion, cradle her child with a tenderness that defied everything around her. In that touch, there was a whole world. It was a love without certainty, without safety, but it was fierce and real. We learned early that tomorrow could bring anything: loss, sale, punishment, but still we loved. Not because we were foolish, but because it was the only thing that was truly ours, even in chains. We chose to give our hearts. I remember the day they took her. There was no warning. 1 minute she was beside me, whispering that she had a dream we would be free one day. The next, she was pulled from the line, loaded into a wagon with others. I ran. I called her name. I begged. The whip found my back, but I didn't stop until I couldn't move anymore. She was gone. I never saw her again, but I never stopped loving her. That love didn't vanish with her absence. It buried itself deep in my soul, became part of the way I breathed, the way I endured. Every day after, I carried her with me. I still do. Some say love is weakness in places like that, but I say, love was what kept us alive. It was not weakness, it was our greatest strength. It reminded us that we were still human, still capable of feeling, of giving, of believing in something bigger than pain. Even the smallest act of love, a smile, a gentle word, a memory shared, was a kind of freedom. And though we had no rights, no protection, and no peace, we had each other. I tell you this now so you understand that even in the darkest chapters of history, love was never erased. It survived in silence. It bloomed in hiding. It endured. And maybe that's why I still speak, because there are names I never got to say again, hands I never got to hold again, but their love lives on in me. If this part of my story speaks to you, if it moves something deep in your own memory, I invite you to stay with me, subscribe now, and walk with me as I share what came next. This isn't the end. There is more to feel, more to understand, more to carry forward. And if you feel led, leave a quiet word in the comments. Let someone else know they are not alone by sharing this story. Because love, once given, never truly dies. It keeps moving from one heart to another, even across generations. And that is something no chain can ever touch. It came like thunder without clouds, sudden, strange, unbelievable. We were in the fields that day, same as always, hands numb from the cold morning dew clinging to the stalks, backs aching from days we could no longer count. There was no sign that the world had changed, not at first. The overseer didn't come with his usual bark. The bell didn't ring on time. Whispers started to spread, crawling from cabin to cabin, from mouth to ear, carried on cautious breaths. They say we're free. That sentence landed like a stone in the chest. No one believed it at first. How could we? We lived too long in chains, seen too many lies dressed in promises. Freedom had always been a dream too dangerous to speak aloud. Now it was being passed around like a story, fragile and unbelievable. Some said soldiers had come. Others spoke of papers being read, of masters ordered to release their hold. Some even claimed the war had ended, but the field still stood, and the tools were still in our hands, and the cabin still waited for us at night. What did freedom look like when nothing else had changed? We didn't cheer, not right away. We didn't dance. There was no celebration, just silence, heavy, careful silence, because freedom had always seemed like a trick, a word that meant something only to white men, not to us. But something was different. The master stopped coming to the porch. The overseer avoided our eyes. One morning, the man who once held the whip told us, in a voice that barely reached the wind, "You can go, if you want," just like that, as if centuries of chains could be unfastened with a shrug. We didn't know what to do. Some of us stayed rooted to the ground, unsure if it was real. Others picked up their few belongings and began to walk, not because they knew where they were going, but because they couldn't stay. I watched families pack their lives into small bundles. I watched elders look to the sky and murmur prayers they had waited a lifetime to say. Some cried, not from joy, but from grief for the years stolen, for the loved ones who never lived to see that day. I walked to the edge of the field where I had first seen the whip raised. I stood there and tried to feel different, but the sun still burned, and my hands were still rough, and the memories hadn't disappeared. Freedom wasn't a door suddenly opened. It was a wound uncovered, raw and uncertain. Where do you go when your only home was built from pain? What do you do when your name was never truly yours? Many of us stayed, Some because we had nowhere else to go. Some because we feared what waited beyond. Others stayed because the land, even in its cruelty, was all we had ever known. The news of freedom did not erase the scars. It did not return the stolen years or silence the ghosts, but it did something else, something quiet and powerful. It gave us the right to choose, even if the road ahead was broken, even if danger still lingered. It was ours to walk, and that was something no one had ever given us before. I remember sitting beside the tree where I had once wept after a beating. I sat there in silence and listened not to shouts or commands, but to bird song, to wind, to my own breath. I realized I was no longer waiting for permission to feel human. That day, for the first time in my life, I belonged to myself, and that feeling, that fragile spark, was the beginning of something new. Not a perfect life, not an easy road, but a life that could be mine. If you followed this story until now, if your heart has walked these paths with me, I invite you to stay close, subscribe, so you can walk with me through what comes next. This journey isn't finished. There's more to remember, more to understand. And if these words have moved you, leave a comment, share your thoughts, your heart, your silence. If someone else needs to hear this, send it their way, because freedom, like memory, lives when it is shared, carried, and kept alive by those willing to listen. They told us we were free, but freedom did not come with food, with shelter, with safety. Freedom came like a wind, loud, sudden, then gone, leaving behind the dust of confusion. We stepped into it barefoot, hungry, without tools, without land, without anything but the clothes on our backs and the scars on our skin. The chains were gone, yes, but the weight remained. We were told we could leave, but leave to where? We had no money, no homes waiting, no government arms open to catch us. Freedom, they said, was a gift, but it felt more like being pushed off a cliff and told to fly. The world outside the plantation was just as cruel, just with different masks. Towns where we were stared at like strangers, jobs that paid pennies, if they paid at all. Laws that said we were free, but men who reminded us every day that we were not wanted. Some of us returned to the same fields, the same masters, working now for wages that couldn't even buy a piece of bread. Others wandered, searching for lost family, for opportunity, for a future we had only dared to imagine. I walked for days once, looking for my brother. I asked at every place I stopped, described his face, his voice. Some shook their heads, some turned away, some didn't even bother to listen. I never found him. Freedom did not return those who were sold. It did not heal the mothers who cried every night for the children torn from their arms. It did not bring back the language we lost, the songs that had been silenced, the dignity stripped away year after year. We were called freedmen now, but we were still feared, still hated, still hunted. I saw men lynched for walking too proudly, women beaten for saying no, children turned away from schools that claimed to be for all. They found new ways to keep us low, laws, loopholes, debt, violence, sharecropping replaced slavery. But the trap was the same. We toiled, they took, they built a system to look clean, but underneath it bled just the same. Some tried to rise, to build lives, to own land, to open schools and churches, and every time we built something, they burned it down. They called us ungrateful, violent, lazy, but they never saw the nights we worked twice as hard, the hunger we endured, the tears we swallowed just to make it one more day. We wanted not revenge, but rest, not power, but peace, not to take what was theirs, but to keep what was ours. But freedom required more than papers, it required recognition, and that they never gave freely. Every step forward felt like a battle. Even standing still could get you killed. So we learned to live with one eye open, one hand ready. Our hearts heavy but still beating. We taught our children to be cautious, respectful, silent in the face of hate, not because we agreed, but because we wanted them to survive. We buried our dead in silence, held our grief like a secret, and moved forward one slow, painful inch at a time. Yet we never stopped, because even if freedom was not free, it was worth fighting for. It was not the end of our suffering, but the beginning of our ownership of our time, our names, our stories. I watched young men become teachers, women lead prayer circles, elders gather children under trees and teach them to read, to write, to dream. I saw the fire we had carried through slavery now burn with purpose. We were not just survivors, we were builders, creators, visionaries. And though the world tried to keep us broken, we remembered who we were. We were not what they made us. We were more, and so we stood, scarred but unshaken. If you've come this far with me, if these words have settled in your spirit, I ask you to keep walking beside me. Subscribe to follow the last chapter of this story, where memory meets legacy. And if these truths speak to something in you, leave a comment or share this story with someone who needs to remember that freedom, real freedom, has always come with a cost, but we paid it and we are still here. I have outlived the chains. I have outlived the whip. I have outlived the men who once owned my name, my body, my future. And yet, I am still here, older now, slower, my hands twisted with time and labor, my back curved from years of bending, under the weight of the world. But I am here, breathing, remembering, holding tight to the threads of a past that too many have tried to forget. I was never supposed to tell this story. Men like me were meant to disappear, to die in the fields, nameless and unmarked, buried beneath the silence of history. But my soul refused. My memories would not be silenced. My truth demanded to live. So I speak now for all those who never got the chance, for the mothers whose children were stolen in the night, for the fathers who were whipped until they could no longer stand, for the brothers and sisters separated at auction blocks, never to meet again. I speak for them. I carry them. I remember them. They walk with me in every word, in every breath. I have seen horrors no man should see, endured pain no child should feel. But I have also seen love blossom in the darkest corners. I have felt hope cling to life like a stubborn weed pushing through stone. I have seen laughter rise from sorrow, music rise from mourning, dreams rise from dusk. And that is why I am still here, not just as a man, but as a witness, a living record, a keeper of truth. The world changed around me, but the echoes of the past never faded. They follow me like shadows, whispering in the quiet, reminding me, reminding all of us, because this story is not just mine, it is ours. It is written in the blood and bone of this land. It is carved into the trees that watched it happen, into the soil that soaked up our tears. And now, it is written into you, you who are listening, you who care enough to remember. I have nothing left to give but this memory, no gold, no glory, just truth. And I offer it freely. Take it, hold it, share it. Let it be a light for those still walking through darkness. If my voice has reached your heart, if this story has stirred something in you, I ask you now, don't let it fade. Click the like button, not for me, but for them, for the countless souls whose names were never written, whose pain was never recorded. Leave a comment to keep the memory alive. Tell others what you felt. Speak their names. Share your thoughts so this story doesn't end in silence. And if you wish to walk further with me, if you want to hear more stories like this of survival, of resistance, of truth, watch the other voices we've preserved here. There are many stories waiting in the playlist linked below, in the description or the comments. Each one carries a soul, a history, a truth that needs to be remembered. Don't let these voices vanish. Don't let the past be buried again. Follow the path, listen deeply, and keep the flame alive, because I am still here, and through you so are they.